Welcome to the Standard H podcast, a casual conversation about the lives of entrepreneurs and those growing companies. I can't thank you enough for listening, as these episodes have been a wonderful supplement to the line of apparel that I'm thrilled to share is steadily growing. If you like what you hear, please visit standard-h.com and sign up for our email list. The website not only hosts every episode of this show, but also allows you to explore the entire product assortment and our latest travel recommendations. As an email subscriber, you will be the first to receive product release information as well as receive offers no one else is privy to. Just visit standard-h.com for more information. Seeing Standard H worn by a growing number of watch enthusiasts has been incredibly cool to witness, so chances are good if you're listening to this, you're probably an enthusiast already. However, if not, it makes no difference, as Passion Fine Jewelry welcomes everyone into their shop in Solana Beach, California. If you're already in deep, you'll know some of the brands that Tim Jackson and his team carry, which are some of the most highly sought-after independent watch manufacturers sold today. Names like Roger Smith, Grunfeld, Kudoke, Habring, Sarpaneva, and many more. If you can't make it to California, visit passionfinejewelry.com for their entire offering online. This episode is also brought to you by Cantonment. Cantonment's flagship product, the kerchief, is a perfect medium between a handkerchief and a bandana. Featuring iconic designs such as the Fender Stratocaster and the dashboard of a Volkswagen GTI, these utilitarian cloths are an item that should be a mainstay in your everyday carry. Tuck one in a back pocket or use one as a neckerchief. Visit them at cantonment.co, that's cantonment.co, and use the code STANDARDH in all caps, no spaces, for 20% off everything in their online shop. Now let's get to the show. This episode welcomes Black Badger, aka James Thompson. You've perhaps seen one of the rings he makes, notably a ceramic one worn by McLaren F1 driver Lando Norris, or maybe you've seen an Archinaut, his recently released watch brand hosting a Fordite dial. Those photos are certainly making their rounds around the interwebs. James is one of those people I love to talk to. We met in New York last October, and not only is his sense of humor disarming and a joy to experience, he can get into the weeds with regards to details in his approach to design, which is why it was inevitable that I'd want to host him for this show. We get into design, philosophy, and of course the creation of Fordite. Frankly, I feel like we really hit the ground running with this one and never let off the gas, so I wanted to keep this intro short. I really hope you enjoy the episode. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H podcast. And no, I was going to say, you have like one of the more fascinating offices with a McLaren sticker behind you on glass, a huge mural of you back there. Like, what? I literally was not going to start this way, but what is your approach to organization?
Making everyone think that I'm a complete idiot.
Okay. All right. So
I'm actually not even joking. I don't know. I've always sort of had this just happy to be here kind of mentality on things. I think coming out of design school and stuff, there's such a tendency to just have your own head up your butt and be so convinced that you're gonna blow the entire world away. And maybe that's just part of being Canadian, but I just don't see it that way. So every industry that I kind of, I've been called the Forrest Gump of design. Like I kind of accidentally, like you think you're going into the bathroom and that ends up being the door that's into like the Oval Office or something, and end up kind of innocently wandering into a party that you weren't invited to.
Sure.
And that's how I ended up with the McLaren sticker behind me, or all the other sort of motorsports bits and odds and sods all around here.
So do you consider yourself lucky?
Yeah.
In that way, not because you live a great life, but just like, do you go to Vegas and win? Like, are you a lucky guy?
No, I've actually never even been to Vegas. I went gambling once in Hull, Quebec, which is across the river from Ottawa.
Okay.
And I lost $25 and went, I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's yours truly.
I don't have the stones for something like that. I think I would just have a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
It's the same reason why I don't play the stock market in this like my dad and brother do. Because as soon as I made like $10, I'd be like, "Woo!" and go buy a hamburger or something.
Right. So where do you fall on the like the scale of risk? Like, because usually like entrepreneurs and people like and designers, right? Like when you're pushing the envelope and Formula One's the same way, right? Like even just design rise, you're well, theirs is a little bit more mathematic with aerodynamics and stuff. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. What about no? But for you, like, are you cool with risks, or do you take risks, or do you play it safe? I mean, it sounds like both.
I don't really have a choice in that, um, because people come to me
Mm.
to take the risks they can't afford to. So it's a bit like the Expendables. I'm expendable. I'm a nobody. So I can come in, try some new stuff with some crazy new materials, and start a fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. But if Mercedes does that, or Omega does that, then it's a major problem.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of what I've made my sort of my corner of the industry is essentially like a bit of a skunk works.
Yeah.
Um, and that's whether I like it or not, whether my nerves can handle it or not. It's something that I seem to be kind of good at, is just being totally off the edge of the map,
Mm-hmm.
not being able to ask anybody else for advice. Like a lot of my early work has been in jewelry design, and it's always been like the stuff that we were talking about in New York. Um, and for me, that just still sounds cool to be able to say, yeah, we talked about this in New York.
Right.
That just sounds really effing cool to me. Um,
Well, we'll get to that for sure.
I've never worked with gold or diamonds or any of these traditional materials that I have friends who studied actual jewelry design.
Mm-hmm.
They do, and people have been working with gold for how many thousands of years. So there is quite a lexicon of knowledge and failures and experiences to draw from.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the guy that made a watch out of fucking coffee. You know, hope I'm allowed to swear in your show. There's gonna be a lot of that. Sorry.
Totally. No, it's fine.
Made a watch out of coffee. Who the hell do I ask for advice on that?
Right.
I've got a ring here I was wearing earlier today that's made from a piece of a 70,000-year-old woolly mammoth molar.
What?
Combine it with a piece from an old vintage F1 car, and you've got something kind of cool.
Yeah. Talk about visiting the past and the future, or at least the present, you know?
Yeah. So there's
Wow.
always been this aptitude of failure is always an option. I absolutely take that to heart. And
I love that.
I've really had to be a big believer in the mantra that scars teach more than trophies.
Mm-hmm.
So we would do these projects when I was in design school, and I would see my friends picking projects that they knew they could do well. I'm going to design a table that I know I can sketch well and deliver well so I get a good grade. And that just seemed like kind of bastardizing the creative process for me. So I would try and make something that I had zero experience in, and I would just absolutely tank it. But then when you would see the teachers, like a couple of months after that project, they would be like, I was just talking about that table you tried to make. I was telling the chief of design for Volvo or something about that. Like it sticks in people's heads more than I made a safe table and I drew it really well and I executed it well and I got a good grade, whatever the hell that means. Like,
Well, that sort of parallels the risk question, right? Is that like, and you probably don't look at it as risk, whereas like somebody who's not in design could be like, oh my God, I would never do that. I might embarrass myself, right? So like,
oh, embarrassing myself
that's your MO.
pays my rent quite literally. There's a watch project that I'm wrist deep in right now that I obviously can't sort of tell you which one it is. But speaking of
Sure.
risk, this is probably the riskiest one that I've done because it's all happened so quick, and it started from hey, I wonder if we can do this, use this material for the dial instead of the traditional material.
Mm.
And they're like, yeah, 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 let's do that. Let's do that. Can you do that? And as I'm in the process of saying, well, actually, I don't know because no one's ever done that before, it's like
Right.
I'm chasing my 6-year-old through the shopping mall and they're already 2 miles down the road
Right.
getting things underway. And I'm like, okay, can we back up a bit? I have no idea if we can even do this. And so now it's at the point where we're quite far along in the project and there's still several big neon question marks flying around over my head all day.
Yeah.
And I've got a bunch of my own money in on this project and I'm responsible for a lot of other people's, it's a very, very well-known brand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially catching lightning in a bottle 3 or 4 times underwater while landing a helicopter
Oh, cool.
naked.
I've done that before.
It's that, yeah, of course. It's that level of trying to keep a million things that you don't understand or you don't have any experience with.
Yeah.
Keep them in your head, keep them lined up, keep them functioning, keep them on schedule. And all through that, I have the organizational ability of a house cat that just quit smoking.
Well, I empathize with that to some degree.
You must have the same thing with your stuff. I mean, all just the
Oh, dude, don't let this like delicately curated shelf behind me fool you. Like,
I did the exact same thing. Let me just step to the side here. Oops, I
yeah.
just accidentally happened to have the crankshaft from a McLaren P1 and
Oh
an
God.
MBNF table clock sitting on a piece of vintage Formula One skid plate because I always have that sitting out in the middle of a machine shop.
Right, right.
I always wear a gazillion-dollar Lynn Verdelin one of one diver watch while I'm on the lathe.
Right. That was gonna be a question, but you just spoiled it for everyone. What
We're so full of bullshit, it's not even funny.
dude, if I turned my camera around, you would see the hurricane that is my office.
You would see the giant Lego car that my kids got me for my birthday in April, and I'm still wrestling with.
Oh, well, at least you opened it because I have an unopened box from 2 years ago that I was like, sure, you know, COVID surely will allow me to build Lego and not happening in 2 years. But
Likely, the worst thing you can do for building Lego is to have kids present.
oh, I would imagine so. Yeah, no, I'd imagine.
That McLaren Formula One, the big sort of articulated one from my kids for my birthday in April.
Hmm.
And like as they're opening up, my son Alfred, who's 6 now, is like, Dad, you got to finish it today because I want to take it in the bathtub later. And I'm thinking like this thing's about $350 or something, and it's like
Right.
1,800 pieces. I'm probably going to have to call McLaren a couple times to figure out how to put this damn thing together. And then he wants to take it to the park so he can, run it down the slide and take it in the sand and stuff.
Right. Did you assemble any of the parts with super glue?
No, but honestly, there's about 400 steps. I'm on about 195 right now. And I
Right.
kid you not, I got stuck on step 3
Oh no.
because the whole catalog, which is ironically thicker than probably the owner's manual for an actual,
McLaren. Yeah.
it's all shot from this kind of, what would you call it? Like isometric perspective, where
Okay.
it's like the kind of AutoCAD when
Yeah.
they show things in perspective, but there is no perspective. So all the
Right.
lines go off parallel to eternity. And like it's trying to show something that happens on the back of the chassis that you're supposed to put together. And I'm like, you're just showing an arrow pointing into an anonymous block.
Right. Yeah, that kind of thing drives people like you and me nuts. I'm like, wait, but it's an arrow. Thanks. I know it goes back there, but where?
Yeah, there's a pair of bolt cutters on
Yeah.
standby and maybe a Dremel. I might have to
I like the Dremel idea. Yeah, I like that idea.
tell you.
All right, so
How
tell
are
me
you, how are
about.
you, man? How's things going with you?
Oh, I'm good, man. But these things aren't about me.
Okay,
the
I'm sorry. It has to be about me then.
No, yeah, no, totally. No, I'm good. Things are really good. This year's been awesome. Did two windups. For the first time ever, did the first one in Chicago in July, and then went to New York where we met. And yeah, it's been a great year.
Nothing confirmed, but we're gonna try. I think we're gonna try and do the wind up in San Francisco.
Well, at this point, it's the only one I haven't done. So I might see you there.
Yeah, I think it's in April.
Yeah, something like that. I have the email. Nelly sent me the email, and I'm just honestly, I'm so buried right now, not just with work with Standard H, but also, and I'll probably cut this out. But my wife and I bought a new house, and I'm gut renovating it. So like, imagine every step, everything in a house that you can design effectively. I've been doing that. I mean, I have a folder of drawings and purchases and receipts. I'm just like, dude, it's a full-time job. Beyond that, really.
Anytime I watch any of those grand design type shows where somebody buys like an old milk farm in the Australian outback and converts into this crazy high-tech architectural house. I
Mm-hmm.
love watching the last 5 minutes when they just show, the guy drinking a coffee and the sun setting behind. But the
Right.
actual process, my wife would have killed me and buried me on that property so
Yeah, I
many
was
times
like,
over because I'm just not the right personality. I would just lose my shiz in the worst way.
oh, dude, that coffee sipping scene, I would be wearing a wig because I'm fucking losing my hair over this stuff. Like, I mean, like literally, it's crazy, man. But
I should
everything's
actually
good.
apologize on that subject because we've bumped this podcast, I think, 3 times now.
Oh no, the last time though was my
The
fault.
last time it was your fault. Every time we're going to do it, I wear my Standard H shirt to work and try and do it really carefully so I'm not getting it dirty.
Oh,
Today it was like, oh crap, it's in the laundry because I wore it a
uh,
couple days ago.
oh no, man, it's all good. No, I appreciate it.
My whatever Louis shirt instead.
Oh man, that's so great. Habitual game changer. Love it.
Do you know who he
Um,
is? Louis?
if maybe.
He's one of the real OG ring makers. So when I
Okay.
first started in jewelry design, doing all the titanium and the carbon rings and all that kind of stuff, he was sort of the Coke to my Pepsi.
Mm,
So we were kind of the only two guys doing it, and we were just beating the piss out of each other for years.
wow.
Just passive aggressively leaving little comments on each other's posts like, "Oh yeah, you got the purple glow. Yeah. Yeah, I looked at that 6 months ago, but it wasn't good." We were such assholes to each other, but constantly, a bit like Ford versus Ferrari and, just
Right.
leveling up. And I go back and I look at the stuff I was doing then, and it was just about sending me flying out a window because we were always just trying to screw over the other guy a little bit more.
That's so funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a classic case of competition being healthy.
I absolutely need it because there was always the respect.
Well,
We were
who?
trying to destroy each other. But there's been so many instances now where somebody just takes a picture of, screenshots one of your ring and sends it to a factory in China and says, "Can you make me 1,500 of these?"
So, what do you consider your business? Like, if you were to label it, like, design agency, like, for example,
Stunt
right?
cock.
Stunt cock. Okay, cool. Um, the fluffers are behind you, I'm sure.
Um, you know what? I really don't know how to answer that. And there's been so many times when you're sitting next to somebody on an airplane, and if you're sketching on a
Yes.
little iPad or something like that, and the person goes, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And it's like, okay, I mean, my education is industrial design. I did a master's in industrial design. I don't think I've ever been paid a single hour in my life to be a traditional industrial designer.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't study jewelry design, but I've been a jewelry designer for, 10, 12 years now,
Right.
but never using jewelry materials. It's more using like the old repurposed race car parts and all that kind of stuff like we've been chatting about,
Sure.
or weird glow in the dark materials from the watch industry, or just random little pieces of the fucking stealth bomber or whatever, little, as you do, little bits kind of lying around.
Yeah.
So I don't actually really know where to put it. Like now, most of my work is I'm a watch designer, but not a watchmaker, because a
Right.
watchmaker, that's a very specific education.
Yes.
That's like saying, my kid draws houses as
Right.
compared to, is he an architect?
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
not really the same thing. So I kind of have a toe in about 6 or 7 different industries, and I kind of need to keep it that way,
Right.
just for my own sanity. Otherwise, I'll just kind of wig out and go bonkers on it.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
Um, I mean, like obviously, a lot of what we talked about originally was cars. I know screw all about cars. I don't even hold a driver's license. But just looking around the room, I mean, there's pieces of Red Bull Formula One cars. There's a McLaren P1 engine.
Right, and you get all this stuff,
Fernando Alonso's car sitting over there. It's
and all this stuff just comes to you, is my understanding, right? At this point, right? Like you don't seek this stuff out. Like you're not. I mean, nobody's selling this shit on eBay. You know what I mean?
you could,
But you could.
but then they probably wouldn't talk to me anymore.
Right, right.
The McLaren cooperation came around actually through they're quite famous now former head of design, Frank Stephenson, who designed the P1 and the Maserati G. I can't remember the names. Maseratis and Ferraris and all these just shit hot cars.
Right.
And we got to be buddies through. I had a friend that worked at MTC in marketing, and I was in London for Salon QP, one of the big watch shows.
Sure.
And he's like, "Well, if you're going to be there on Thursday, I can see if we can get you in for a factory tour."
Oh, cool.
Fantastic. He just said, just kind of keep your head down and don't sort of take any pictures, and we can maybe sort of take a look around and see stuff. And we'll introduce you to Frank, because Frank's this really famous car designer who's really into watches. And I had just released my first watch, the Schofield Black Lamp, about 2014, around there, 2015. So I'm going to MTC for this kind of behind the scenes tour. Literally, as I'm pulling up to the main door, the big glass one that beside the lake, my phone beeps, and it's my idiotic friend saying, "Yeah, so we've got all the prototypes for I think what would have become the 570S. All those prototypes were all sort of being wheeled around, so there was nobody allowed in."
Wow.
So he goes, "Yeah, so we had to kind of tell them that you were going to buy a P1, so that's how we snuck you in."
Nice.
And it's like I showed up on the fucking bus, in like jeans and a t-shirt, like an old like Van Halen t-shirt, looking like I don't have $10 to my name.
There's nothing more LA than that situation.
Well, now, yeah, I can get that. But this was like as I'm walking in the door, shaking hands with Bruce McLaren's son-in-law, I think it was Stephen. And they're sort of showing me around like I'm an investor or something. And I'm just like,
Right.
my voice went up about 3 octaves. I'll have to ask my manager, Mr. Simpson.
Wow.
And so just sort of through that, I got to be really, really good friends with Frank Stephenson. And we've always kind of had these sort of dorky Facebook instant messenger little design chats. So he's bought several of the rings that I do. I've got almost everything in this room is autographed by him, even things he didn't make, which was weird. But no, actually, I don't know if you can be able to see it, but the long horizontal thing.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, that one.
Yeah, with like the winglets. Yeah.
Yeah. That was a future concept by the McLaren design team to see what F1 could look like 20 years in the future. And because that was one of the days that I was there, Frank actually had them knock it up with it's got my Black Badger logos all over it and stuff, and little Canadian flag and my name as the driver and stuff.
That's epic.
And actually just underneath it, if I can just humble brag for 1 second.
Sure.
Just underneath it is a current McLaren F1. They did like limited edition prints. And a friend of mine bought one for me for Christmas. And then through kind of a weird series of events, through another English friend, one of my Gulf Racing loomed rings ended up on the hand of Lando Norris.
Right.
Became the guy just popped up on my Instagram direct messages. "Hey, buddy, how's it going, man? Just got we're sitting here casually chatting with the guy while he's in a limo or in a taxi going somewhere."
Right.
So I sent the print to him because it's actually his number 4 McLaren car. So I just got it back like a couple days ago. So it's signed and stuff.
Oh, sick. Well, he dented a table with that ring, right?
Yeah. Good memory. He has one of the. It's like I don't know if that's going to show up in your camera. It's like this one.
Yeah.
Except mine has Fordite on the inside, but it's black ceramic and it's got blue and orange loom.
Right.
In the McLaren sort of vintage Gulf Racing colors. And he was doing a Twitch or a podcast or something with his friend Max, this guy Max Futrell, who's one of his best friends and sort of not sidekick. That sounds so rude and condescending, but we'll say
Right,
sidekick.
yeah, buddy.
And they were talking about their favorite F1 courses and stuff. And he's trying to make a point, and Lando kind of bangs his hand on the table, and it was like a steel table. And you just heard this bell, dong. And his eyes go huge, and he looks down, and you hear him sort of off mic go, "Holy fuck, I dented your table, man." And they both just stop, and they're looking at this dent in the table. And Lando holds up his hand, and he's looking at his ring. Then he looks at the table, then he looks at the ring, and he's like, sorry.
Not a scratch on it.
The ring was fine. I actually had a message from him after that saying, "Dude, whatever this ring is made of, like we need this on the cars."
Yeah, well done. Yeah, exactly. Oh man. So where did you go to design school?
I flunked out of a couple of really good ones. I started off at a place in Vancouver, where I'm originally from, a place called the Emily Carr Institute, which I tried for years to get into because I didn't go to art school first. Like I didn't take art classes like most of my designer friends, sort of had artistic parents and they've been drawing since they were little kids and they've gone through art classes all through high school and stuff. My first art class was at art school.
Wait, so you applied to design school effectively with zero portfolio is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, kind of.
That's ballsy, dude.
I did a bunch of what they call non-credit courses, and it's almost
That sounds like art, huh?
it sounds like art, man. You can tell I've had to explain this to my dad while I was trying to figure out how to pay for these classes.
No, but Dad, it means nothing. It just costs money.
It's not something super valuable like an art degree, Dad. No, it was I had to do a bunch of sort of like the kind of classes you do to build a portfolio to apply to get into art school.
Right.
And looking back, they were all just complete self-righteous bullshit. I'm going to make a table that helps feed the children of the world and all this kind of crap. Like and it's the same 8 projects every single designer has in their portfolio that they refuse to show anymore.
Right.
But a lot of it was just a creative process I really liked. I just got really excited about a blank piece of paper. Sure. I keep coming back to a blank piece of paper as some kind of a focus point in my life.
For sure.
And I absolutely will tell you, a blank piece of paper does make a noise. Just sit there and look at it, and you can hear it. You can hear the blankness of it, just fucking laughing at you, or whatever it is you're trying to do to it. It's like your cat trying to give it a pill. It's just looking at you going, it's just not going to happen.
Not happening. Right.
You don't have the rocks for this. So I was at that school in Vancouver for a bit, and I just ended up hating it because it was so decorative. It didn't really matter what you did as long as it was, this was like about year 2000. So everything was purple, semi-translucent IMAX and all this kind of Volkswagen New Beetle stuff. And it was very decorative, and I didn't like it. And I took all my projects too seriously. And just like every first year student, I thought I was so unbelievably talented and such a genius that I knew more than everybody. And I made my life miserable. So I flunked the hell out in about second year. And at that time, we had an exchange student from Sweden at our school. And just the way she talked about the educational system over here, like, you don't get grades. You don't get, I got 75% on a project, you got 85%. Clearly, you're going to get the job and have a better life.
Right.
There was no grades. It was just, what did you learn? And that really, really, really kind of started me down this path of just exploration and just fucking up all the time.
So it wasn't even pass fail.
No, it was the project might be design a short-term sitting device, not a chair, because a chair you think of 4 legs and a back, but a short-term sitting device can be a couch, a cushion, a rock, a pile of oranges, sort of whatever you can think of. And I really, really enjoyed that way of working, of just kind of coming at things non-linear. So where the hell was it going? You can tell I've just been rocking espresso all day.
You made it miserable for yourself. You flunked out, and then I guess it took you
to
out
of that school in Vancouver. And then actually decided almost kind of on a whim that I was going to move to Scandinavia by myself. I didn't know a single person in Europe. Obviously, didn't speak the language, and just left home and everybody I'd ever known, and moved to Europe by myself. And about half an hour into the flight, kind of went, "The fuck did I do?"
Oh shit!
My God, it was just absolute righteous panic. It was just glorious. But I think it kind of had to be that way. It had to be a
right.
Jump out of the plane, then see if you got a parachute on kind of thing. Otherwise, I would have just taken a comfortable, semi-easy, everything's okay kind of route out. It needed to be a holy crap moment.
Yeah, it's almost like, okay, so forget the term risk, because I don't even want to hear myself say that again in this conversation. It's almost like an adrenaline thing, it sounds like, for you. Are you kind of an adrenaline
I'm
junkie?
very competitive.
Okay.
And I would almost say I'm quite combative in these kinds of things. I like taking the fight to something, just the stupidest things, like somebody could steal my car and I'd be like, yeah, oh, that sucks. But like sharpening a pencil, and when the sharpener gets a little dull and it doesn't actually cut,
it drives you crazy.
It just, there's got to be a better way.
Oh my God, we're such.
And then I'll spend like 4 hours making
way.
a jig so I can sharpen a pencil like on the lathe,
Yeah.
So now I can take a deer down with that pencil. Like it's stupid, but that's just, but that process, that kind of way of working is, you were asking before, how do I define my job? That.
Right.
If you say to somebody, I want you to design me a car, and a bunch of dudes from design school sit down with a box of markers and start drawing, you've already failed. You're going to get a physical object that solves your problem. Whereas I always kind of really got more excited about, can I go back 3 steps? And is there something I can change in the problem so that there's no need for the vehicle at the end? Like it's easy to get really dumb and kind of overly poetic about this, but we'll say it like this. I would always get a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven on the way into my last studio. And I liked a little bit of sugar in my coffee, like about half of one of these packets, and you'd stir it. And I would always think it was so pointless. Put a tiny bit of sugar in, stir it twice with a plastic spoon, and then you end up, or do you throw the spoon away or something? It just felt really kind of dumb and kind of wasteful. And this is probably really obvious to most people, but then I realized, if you put the sugar in first, then pour the coffee in,
it stirs itself. Yeah, it's negligible. Right.
The spoon becomes irrelevant.
Right.
If you go back in time and don't fall down and skin your knee, the Band-Aid is now irrelevant.
Useless. Right.
Useless. And I mean, it's such an obvious kind of way of thinking, but I think because so many designers are trained in physical problem solving. What's an object I can make and I can sell you that facilitates whatever it is you're trying to do? And maybe it's because I can't draw to save my life. I think that's probably part of it. But I just like the other way of looking at it, the sort of what we call the soft sciences of it. Not ergonomics, not engineering, but the I've had 4 glasses of wine and I'm starting to get lucid, and now the ideas are starting to come kind of way of doing it.
So you drink too?
It does happen on occasion.
Right.
Well, no, but that way of thinking even, let me know if I'm just talking in circles, by the way, man. You can tell how socially starved I am in here.
That's my favorite part of these shows.
In 2010, when it was time to do my grad project from design school here in Sweden, my master's thesis project, I was getting into watches, and I thought I want to do like a cool watch design. Mm-hmm. And I had kept in contact with a couple of the people from NASA, from the university, the previous university that I was at in Sweden.
So casual.
Dude, it wasn't even my sort of project. I moved to Sweden to go to this school specifically to do this project, which was where they sent a bunch of the grad students to the Johnson Space Center for about 8 weeks. Okay. And they worked on stuff for the International Space Station. And I was so gung-ho for that. And then as we're about to start the project, the school had changed. The school in Sweden had changed from an international master's program to a Swedish master's program, which meant it was only open to Swedish students. Mm-hmm. So even though the course was in Texas, I was yanked out about a month before we were supposed to go, and basically got deregistered from the university. Like 2 years into a master's.
Wow.
And that's actually when I started my company, Black Badger, because I was just unbelievably pissed off and just had no problems to solve, so to speak.
Why the name? Is the name obvious? Like, how'd you come up with it?
No, it's just stupid. I thought it was cool at the time. Now it makes me crazy. A badger, for its size, is freakishly aggressive. It'll fight a grizzly. It'll lose, but it'll, sort of go at it with anything and everything. And I've always kind of dug that aspect because I'm a one-man army, so to speak. And especially when I find myself sitting across the table from someone like Frank Stephenson or any of these sort of, mega watch brands and stuff that I'm working with, they've got their entire marketing department and engineering department, and I've got a cup of coffee. Feels good. I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I was saying about the master's project. I thought I was going to do a watch, and I pitched the idea to who was going to be our sort of professor handler for this project. I worked on it with a friend of mine, and we talked about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do this watch thing. We wanted to have some kind of a NASA connection. It sounds really kind of dumb now. It was going to be like an update of the Omega Speedmaster for the potential Mars missions that were being talked about in about 2008, 2010 or so. Mm-hmm. And the teacher goes, yeah, that's really interesting. I've got another project here that I actually need a couple students for, and you guys might be perfect for it. And she slides a business card across the table, and it was the Advanced R&D Department of the Royal Australian Navy.
Okay.
And they were looking for people to help them design the next generation of submarines. So going back to that Forrest Gump, right place at the right time comment from before, I can barely even swim. I mean, I grew up in Calgary, for Christ's sake. I could swim in wheat maybe, but and we went to South Australia, and we spent about 2.5, 3 months on a secure Navy base, helping them design next generation Navy submarines, but not the weapons and all that kind of stuff. It was purely habitation concepts. Mm-hmm. And I think at the outset, we thought it was going to be one of these really, like I had this fantasy of doing like the Top Gear, like the carbon fiber toilet and all these really kind of ridiculous things. And a couple of weeks into the research there, we found the biggest issue with submarines isn't the fear of being at the bottom of the ocean in a can, because they're all okay with that or they wouldn't have got through there.
Right.
It was the little slice of life things. The toilet's too small. I have to share the bed with somebody else. I can't check my Facebook, and everything smells like what we had for dinner last night.
Right.
So actually everything that we worked with was personal space and privacy issues in extreme environment habitation design.
That's so interesting.
So we thought it was going to be this, I thought it was going to be this really Hunt for Red October, Tom Clancy, night vision goggles kind of project. I designed a fucking shower, a bathroom. But it was that, again, it was that way of thinking, that kind of oddball problem solving is what they were really interested in, because they had probably 200 of the finest naval engineers and architects in the world in this company, but they had nobody from the design side of things. And
by doing that, you made their lives better, right?
It's we made their lives so much worse.
Really?
Oh God.
Just how they function, though, like having privacy and having your own personal space and maybe taking a shower a little easier. It decreases the amount that you're on edge doing everything else, right?
In theory, yes, I completely agree. And that was what we based most of our work on.
Yeah.
The problem is that, how do I say this nicely? Do you have a lot of listeners in Australia?
I have several. Yeah. No, it is. Yeah. It's like my fourth largest market.
Australian dudes are famous for being aggro. It's a very headstrong
They don't give a shit. Yeah, I love it.
whine about stuff, if I can go do it.
Yeah.
And especially when you put that into like a military setting as well. It was just like,
Mm.
I'm just going to bang my head on the wall until there's a hole and then I can walk through that wall. Like, that's great, guys. Good thinking. So
Kool-Aid
we
man.
actually got to present this project at a NATO Navy conference about a year after we graduated. And just by moving around the existing floor plan, not by actually making it, but just by doing the floor plan a little quote unquote smarter,
Mm-hmm.
we managed to save something like 10 square meters of space on a Navy submarine, which costs a couple of dollars.
Yeah.
So we're presenting this and we're saying, but just before we even get to our concepts, by doing these three little smart things, you've removed the need for an entire hallway that runs the entire length of the boat, which saves, we'll say 5 square meters, whatever the hell it is, 10 square meters.
Mm-hmm.
And we're presenting this, and this guy from the US Navy in the audience sticks his hand up and he goes, so you've managed to save 10 square meters on a warship. And we say, well, yeah. And he goes, well, that's great. That means we can carry 3 extra cruise missiles. And we're like, no. It means the toilet can be the same size as the toilet you have at home. The shower can be the same, just like you're saying, the shower can be the same size that is at home.
They didn't care.
You live better, you sleep better, you perform better, the boat works better. And here's me standing up on stage in front of about 1,500 people in Glasgow. And you know what this guy says to me? He goes, son, if you wanted a hot shower, you should have joined the fucking Air Force. And the whole room just bursts out into laughter because it was all like ex-military dudes that are consultants. And everyone's just howling with laughter. And I turn and look at my buddy Matthias that I did the project with, and we both just kind of go, like, it's not like we're designing a car that we're going to see on the road.
Right.
When the hell am I going to set foot on an Australian Navy submarine? And if you're going to laugh off design recommendations as, oh, well, you're just too soft and too wimpy for this, lots of luck, sir.
Interesting. Yeah.
And oddly enough, the people that make the decisions will never set foot on the boat.
Right.
Like, you think about why you bought your last car. Probably some personal reasons.
Right.
The color, the fit, the performance, all that. But the people that decide on these things will more than likely never, ever set foot on it. So
that's really
interesting. It's an odd perspective. So that's my 7-hour way of describing my weird little company.
No, but I think it's brilliant. And thank you for sharing it. So would you consider your rings your hero product? That's how I got introduced to Black Badger, is through your rings.
Probably used to. I would almost say now I'm a little kind of handcuffed to them.
Okay.
Because they were never meant to be popular. Mm-hmm. I would make 1 or 2 things like for myself, and it was mostly just done to kind of, like, this was the early days of Instagram. So I would take a picture of some cool glow in the dark ring and it would get a bunch of likes on Instagram in 2012. And I thought I was cool. And that was kind of all I needed. And then you would start getting 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 messages a day saying, fuck, that's really cool. Can you make me one? How much are they? And I would sort of get really frustrated because everything that I had done was never meant for serial production. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was like, try and make like a lot of this Fordite material that I work with it's just 40-year-old lumps of car paint that have built up in a car factory. It's a waste product. And if you can manage to get a ring out of it, good on you. But it's not like the material is meant to be processed that way. It's not like titanium that you can just slap the crap out of and do anything you want to it. This stuff, if you sneeze on it, it'll just blow apart.
Is that right?
Yeah, you really need to know what you're doing with it.
So its rigidity is very directional.
Yeah, think of it like the crappiest plywood ever.
Okay, yeah.
Because my mic doesn't pop out. There's a piece right here. So that's Fordite.
Oh, wow.
It's just overspray from car factories that's built up over years and years and years of painting many cars. And it would usually sort of drip and form on the underside of work surfaces. So that's where you get...
Oh, that's why it's not cleaned up, because it's out of the way and it's not exactly visible, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like a barber shop where, like, okay, I got to sweep up the hair. You know what I mean? Like, it's just sitting there.
I actually talked to a guy who's in his 70s now, and his first job when he was about 15 was at one of the Ford plants in Michigan, and he got a hammer and a screwdriver, and he had to crawl along under the assembly line and just knock off all these kind of geological stalactites of paint that were forming and dripping as the chassis were being rolled around and stuff.
Right.
So the ones that have on the underside that have really dripped quite nicely, you get, I mean, it's just like tree bark.
So cool.
Now, where it gets to be hard is a lot of those,
The indentation. Yeah. Yeah.
they go down like this and they might only touch for about half a millimeter at the bottom. So you can sort of pop them off by hand. Some people will just infill that entire piece with black resin and stabilize it like you do with wood. But it's a bit of a cop out.
Well, it seems like that's a finite amount of product worldwide, though. Like when do you run out of it?
I might be already. I don't know. I mean,
Really?
I've got a guy, a really good friend of mine in the U.S. who brokers this stuff. First of all, there was a sweet spot for the good Fordite, and it was about the 1970s to mid 1990s in the U.S. And that was because car paint was so full of shit, solvents and the chemicals. It was
Right.
just horrible.
Right.
And not just the actual components being painted, but because this stuff, it's the amalgamation, it's the overspray that builds up, say, on the mounting hardware. That frame has gone through the ovens 2 or 3 or 400 times by the time that chunk gets big enough to knock it off. So it's like rock solid.
Right.
I tried something similar. Actually, this is Fordite as well, but that is McLaren Fordite.
Yeah, it looks like an agate.
It One of the names for this stuff is Detroit agate.
I was gonna say, is it called Fordite because it comes from the Ford factory originally?
Traditionally, it's called Fordite. I mean, I've never encountered quote Fordite that's come from a Honda factory. I'm supposing it would be almost exactly the same thing.
Okay.
But as far as sort of the response that you get from the car nerds, if it's not Fordite from the Ford factory, then just go to hell.
Interesting.
So my stuff is from there. So the problem with new generation car paint, especially supercar paint, is everyone's trying to be greener. So McLaren paint is water-based.
So it's thinner.
It's thinner. It's a little more elastic, so your car doesn't chip as much. It's a little greener for the environment, but it also means that it doesn't perform the same way as Fordite. So I am a little happy and proud to say I believe I actually hold the entire world's supply of McLaren Fordite. This was something that Frank Stephenson and I were working on a couple of years ago. And you can almost take quite a thick piece of it and just bend it, like it stays soft.
Interesting.
So maybe if it was something like
But there's no elasticity though, or when you bend it, it stays that way? Kind of like
when you bend it, it goes back, but all the layers kind of start to come apart and stuff.
I see.
And you can kind of take a fingernail to the edge and just draw on it because it's so soft.
Right.
So something like this is a drink coaster I made.
That's such a great colorway.
Needs to be mounted on solid carbon fiber on the back, or it would just kind of crap out. Isn't that neat?
That's so beautiful.
Your buddy Ted's got one of these.
Oh yeah, okay.
He's got one of those.
Shout out Ted Gashu.
Ted.
So okay, well this kind of gets us forward into this kind of concoction of conversation between Fordite and watch design because of Archinaut.
Yeah, and I'm just looking around. I'm super pissed because I don't even have one.
Oh, that's fine. They're in high demand. I get it.
Actually, yeah. The Fordite ones were just blasting them out to customers and stuff. So it was like we had each, sort of picked which one we want to have, and we're all ready to get it. And then it's like, as soon as we got cases and hands and all ready to start making, it's like, we should send them out to clients instead.
So tell me, walk us through this process because what was the genesis of Archinaut? A, B, who are your partners? Like who helps make your cases, for example, and like what was like that upstart like?
Specifically in the cases, make sure you come back to me on that one because that's actually kind of a cool anecdote.
Okay.
Archinaut was around for a couple of years before me. I met these guys at Salon QP in London. Anders and Simon, two of the bright boys from Denmark, Copenhagen, where Arconaut's based, came over to see me because they had just seen a bunch of the weird work I was doing with sort of strange materials and stuff. And we just started chatting. And they're just awesome. They're just like, I was exhibiting at QP, so I had my own booth, and I was just inundated with people that wanted to pull you into their own pet project.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't like Monsieur Rolex walks in and says, "Hey, you're the guy we're looking for." Right. It was somebody who would, it was kind of like that. Somebody would come in and give you a business card and say, I'm head of brand development for Richard Mille watches, and we'd love to talk to you about something. You're like, holy shit. So I spend like the entire night talking to this guy, ignoring everybody else in my booth. And then we talk a few days later, and he's like, yeah, my brother is, like opening a pizzeria, and do you want to help him design a logo? Like it was something just that useless. And I was so pissed. If you would have just said, you want to help us do a logo? Sure, here's my card, call me. Not, I'm head of brand development, blah, blah, worldwide marketing for Richard Mille.
Right.
Monsieur Mille would love to talk to you. I'm like, oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
And I got totally buffaloed on it. So the Arconaut guys came in. At that point, the brand was called Goldman Brandt. Simon Goldman and Anders Brandt. And I instantly started giving them shit about that because I said their name sounded like a law office.
Like a law firm, yeah. Yeah.
The accounting firm of Goldman Brandt Underwriters.
Right.
But they were just they weren't watch guys. This was a couple of Danish geeks. They weren't old money Geneva. They weren't pretentious startup, trust fund kids of any sort. So I helped them on the first release called the Arc One a couple of years ago, and I just basically just did a bunch of consulting and answered questions on the loom aspects of the watch. Mm-hmm. And then when it came time for the Arc Two, they said, well, we'd love to, go on the run with you again, but it kind of is a little dumb if every single watch we do is going to be a Black Badger limited edition guest starring kind of thing. So why don't we bring you in as a part owner? And I just thought that was just absolutely cool. So I've got a good sized chunk of the company. I'm kind of officially on board. And as far as who the company is and what we do, that kind of depends what day of the week you ask.
That's the best.
Right?
Yeah.
What we're really trying to do is just have fun with it. And that sounds like such a high school way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that we're not Swiss, we're not Swiss and we're not sorry is one of those things that's like written up on the wall here somewhere. Because there aren't a lot of industries that are so tied to one country.
Right.
Germany might want you to think they're the only ones that make cars. Italy might want you to think they're the only ones that make wine, but France might disagree.
Right.
But with Switzerland and watches, it's like, if you're not from Zurich or Geneva, get fucked. You don't mm-hmm. belong here kind of thing. So we're not even trying to fit in. And the problem is now in the days of Kickstarter and all this kind of crap, every single piece that comes out is doing this. We're disrupting habitual game changer, like my shirt. Everyone's trying to change the game or disrupt the system. And it's like, we just want to make fucking watches, man.
Right.
We're not trying to start a revolution. They're just cool and we're having fun with them.
Yeah. Even if it is just visually different, you're different automatically. Like, you're not trying to be the Patek of movement, I'm sure. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure the price point would be very different.
Well, yeah. And if you're a movement, I was going to say movement snob sounds kind of rude. Well, but if you're a movement snob, there's probably only 2 or 3 brands that you would ever buy. Right. You're only ever going to look at a Patek or a JLC or something like this. And I've worked with some of those very, very high-end brands, and I couldn't tell you the movement. I did a watch with David Toon a couple of years ago. Couldn't tell you the movement to save my life. I did a piece with MB&F a couple of years ago. I think it was a Celita something.
Right.
Don't know.
What did you work on with MB&F?
That is the MB&F HMX Black Badger edition.
Sweet.
Which still gives me goosebumps to say 8 years later.
Yeah.
About 2016, these came out. I met Max Buser, who, if you don't know who he is, It's your fault, not his.
Totally.
The prince of the watch industry. He's one of the most famous people in the industry and one of the most relevant people. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him at Salon QP. Everybody kept saying, go talk to that guy. Go talk to that guy. That's Max Busser. And I had to Google who he was because I didn't know screw all about independent watches at that point.
Right.
And I looked at who he was, and I looked at the watches, and I decided I wasn't cool enough to talk to this guy. And I literally ran away and hid in the corner. And then another night came back and actually got my balls up and went and chatted with him. And we literally just stood there in the corner for a good half hour, just chit-chatting about everything, not about business, not about how much money we can make, just about Transformers. I think it was like just dumb life stuff. And I got his business card, and I kind of thought I'm okay with that. I have Max Busser's business card. That's a feather in my cap.
Totally.
And I was showing him some of the rings I'd done. I think I had made a carbon fiber watch buckle for a 7 Friday watch.
Okay.
This is how stupid I am. I made like a $1,500 strap for like an $800 watch. Like, but it was the thinking behind it that he really liked and he really related to. So about a week later, I was back home here in Sweden, and I was like doing the dishes. I was probably standing there in my underwear having a cup of coffee or something in the kitchen in the morning. My phone rings. It's Max calling from Geneva saying, keep thinking about that stuff we chatted about. Would you be interested in doing a collaboration with us? And I kid you not, this is like just skating around on a frozen pond and somebody just comes over and hands you an NHL contract.
Right.
I did not deserve it at that point. This was plucked out of absolute nowhere.
Right.
And
Forrest Gump.
A fucking Forrest Gump, buddy. And they have this series they do at MBNF. For those who don't know, MBNF stands for Max Busser and Friends.
Right.
And the Friends is their network of people they collaborate with, sort of all around the world, all skill sets, all this. And a lot of the brands aren't really very transparent about who does what. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you ask me who does my movements or who makes my hands, I'll probably tell you to go to hell. But with MBNF, that's their thing, is they always really celebrate, these kind of Ocean's 11 super teams they put together.
Super cool. Who makes your cases?
Shut up. Yeah, we'll get on that one. The cases for Argonaut.
Yeah.
That was actually quite cool because Anders had designed a case that looks very, very, very simple. And it is unbelievably difficult to manufacture because tolerances and all this kind of stuff. So he actually showed it to a bunch of the really high-end custom case manufacturers in Switzerland. Mm-hmm. And they just flat out said, no, can't do it, can't touch it, it's going to wreck our machines, go design something else. So he just got stonewalled everywhere. And Denmark is the world center for the manufacturing of hearing aids.
Oh, whoa.
So our case was actually prototyped and manufactured by a micro-engineering company from the hearing aid industry.
My God, I love this.
What?
I love this. Yeah, this is amazing. Yeah. Got it.
Sorry, I'm 6 years old. And that, again, is this way of working. We're not Swiss and we're not sorry. We're not trying to fit into your industry. We're doing our own thing over here. So that's why you'll never really see us doing gold watches, rose gold, guilloche, Côte de Genève, all these sort of fantastic, really traditional Swiss watchmaking practices because we're not Swiss. Right. I mean, fucking hell, I made a watch out of coffee. I mean, I'm doing a bunch of Fordite watch dials right now. Look at that.
What's the price point of an Argonaut?
Between about 3,000 to 4,000 US. Depends on whether it's the dark matter, which is our, I don't want to say entry series, but those are about 35, I believe, and I think they're all sold out actually. Mm-hmm. Those were made through sheer vandalism, which I'm a little bit proud of. The dial in the dark matter series is a stone composite made of shale.
Okay.
And there's a fountain in front of the building where I live here in Sweden that's made of this shale stone. And it's just the crappiest stone ever. Like my kids go up to the corner of it, and if you sort of pick at a corner with your fingernail, big sheets of it sort of pop off. Like it's just falling apart.
Oh, wow.
So I picked up a bunch of these pieces and put them through an industrial espresso grinder, as you do, and I'm feeding gravel through a coffee grinder. Like, welcome to Black Badger. Here's your goggles.
Right.
and got this really nice, super lightweight stone powder out of it, which we cast into the dials. And when you look at the dials up close, you've got this unbelievable detailed structure out of a very, very boring pedestrian looking stone.
Yeah.
So just that way of thinking, that way of working. So the dark matter ones were the first series that we did when I was kind of officially on board. And so that was the Arc 2 dark matter. Now we're flying through the Arc 2 Fordite edition.
Right.
Which is, I think we sold about 20 or 25 before we even officially released them.
That's amazing.
People on our email list that said, I really like that dark matter one, but do you have anything that's got a little bit more color to it?
Right.
And I had done some Fordite watches with George Bamford a couple of years before, in about 2019. But it was a 10-piece series. And being Bamford watch departments, they sold out in about 2 days.
Right.
So financially and stuff, it was like, yeah. But I'm like, there's more we can do with this. I've got more to say.
Sure.
The expression goes. So we picked it up with Archinaut. And it almost feels like it's a better expression for the material.
Mm-hmm.
Because with the Archinaut, we just got rid of everything on the dial. No indicators, no 10, 12, 1, nothing. Just the Fordite. And we redesigned the hands to make them a little bigger for legibility, because the dials can be really quite busy.
Yeah, they're busy. Yeah. Right.
I mean, if you look at something like that one, that's...
Yeah. It's an acid trip on your wrist.
Yeah, right? Just looks like... Yeah. Some kind of a drug incident. So every single one is a piece unique. And it makes our marketing guys bonkers.
Right.
Because somebody wants to buy one, and it's like, oh, can I have that one that, Anders just showed on Instagram?
Right.
Well,
it's the only one. It's
sorry. The next person in our ordering window who's already prepaid, 6 months ago, gets to pick from the next batch, and et cetera. So that side of things makes it really complicated.
Right.
For me, it's just fucking fun. It's just so much fun.
Yeah.
Because you'll pick up these chunks, and it literally just looks like a bright red piece of, tree bark almost. And looking inside, trying to figure out what different colors you're trying to chase.
Right.
This one has one single stripe of bright Kermit the Frog green in the middle.
Right.
And that stripe is about 1/4 of a millimeter wide. And if you want to have that show on the outside of the dial, right? So it's almost like these dudes that can pick up a raw diamond or an emerald and look at it inside and figure out what the stone is doing and what's the best way to cut it from.
Right.
And like with these dials I just showed you, if I were to take either of those and sand them for 20 seconds more, completely different colors, completely different pattern. Yeah. It is 4-dimensional art because there is time in it. These are layers that were sprayed down by a human hand in 1980. If that person is still alive, who knows? Each layer was a car. Somebody bought that car. And we're not even talking about especially sexy cars. We're talking about fucking Ford vans from 1986 or something.
Yeah, totally.
Somebody bought one of these cars and they took the kids to hockey practice and they bought groceries and they drove to school and they lived their normal lives. So each of these crazy layers is a little portal, a little window into someone's life.
That's so cool. Yeah. Hey, not to interrupt you, and because I'm a sucker for details, when you do that stone ground through the espresso grinder and it becomes a powder, how do you then make it a dial? Is it resin backed? Is it like, how does it become another solid object?
I scream at it really, really loud and it knows what
scared.
to do.
Yeah, it gets scared.
Like,
Yeah.
No, it is actually it's a really low tech process. Once it gets to that point, it's just cast with a very optically clear resin, and then
Okay.
we mill the dials out of that.
Sure.
We had looked at actually casting individual dials, but because the Dark Matter series was only 50 watches,
Mm-hmm.
making dials that would have been good enough for
Mm-hmm.
a watch dial, or
Yeah.
making molds that would have been accurate enough for a watch dial, would have cost a lot. So
Right.
it's actually easier to just sort of precision CNC them.
Yeah.
And the
Cool.
people that own these very expensive CNC machines that are used to milling, aluminum and stuff, really love it when you ask them if they can mill stone or a brick of
Right.
coffee or fucking peanut butter or whatever the kind of stupid crap I'm going to throw at them
Right.
next week.
Right. 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 Oh man, that's so crazy. What's been like the hardest part of Arcanaut as far as you're concerned? Like, has there been anything that's been difficult and or that you've like learned from that you may have done differently?
Probably Anderson is drinking.
Oh, it's, it's a tough hurdle to get over.
He's going to hear that. Um, I would probably say kind of where we're at now is really quite challenging because I mean, as far as it being a full time, fully functional brand, we're only about a year and a half, maybe 2 years in, and it's become really popular quite fast. So we're
Mm-hmm.
having all the usual growing pains,
Right.
but usually it takes several years to get to the point of like, we need a bigger facility, we need to hire 4 more people, we need this, we need this, we need financing. That we sort of got into that about 6 months after we started calling it Arcanaut. So it's like, so that's difficult because trying to stay independent in the face of that is really hard.
Well, let me interrupt you for this one point then. So, why
You'd
do
like to
that?
invest.
No, honestly, like if I were in your shoes, you have to have a very difficult conversation with yourself and say, listen, okay, we don't have the capacity to grow, grow, grow. Well, if you're talking to a guy like me, like I don't want to be 150 member staff. Like, you know what I mean? Like I don't care to do that. So it's simply supply and demand at this point. So why don't you just raise your prices and keep the production low?
Thought about that. I mean, the Fordite is more expensive than the Dark Matter.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 400 or 500 bucks more expensive because there actually is a hell. I mean, I hand make every single one of these dials. But as far as just sort of jacking up prices and sort of bumping ourselves into a different price bracket,
Well, and not jacking it up in such a negative connotation, but charge extra. You know what
there
I
are
mean?
a bunch of independent brands that
Mm-hmm.
have a
Mm-hmm.
couple of releases out at $3 or $4 or $5,000, and then suddenly it's 1750, and you're like, what did I miss? Like, what the hell? Um, and this is something where I've spoken to. I'm extremely fortunate to have access to someone like Max, where I can just kind of
Right.
quite innocently bump these kind of Forrest Gump questions off of them.
Sure.
And scalability is something that they have done at MBNF very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically said, we don't want to be a company that makes 5,000 watches a year.
Right.
We want to be a company that makes 150 watches a year. Whatever we have to do that and to stay at that, we're okay with.
Mm-hmm.
So, granted, we're talking about a company that does have watches that are over $150,000, but everything's sold out. I think Max said when I saw him in New York, they're sold out for several years.
Yeah, it's like 5 years. Yeah.
There's just none of them. They
Yeah.
just they get snapped up so fast, and not even by just flippers. Like Rolex and stuff. A lot of those are getting bought up just by gray market flippers, which is why everyone's got, including myself, has bad shit to say about Rolex. Um, Keeping production low, keeping it personal, and keeping the customer relationship, we are really going out of our way to do.
Mm-hmm.
If we sold out hard, and man, we've thought about it,
Mm-hmm.
um, we'd be making cake loads of money.
Right. Is that what is important,
No, I want to keep it as a garage band.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
I think we kind of owe that to the quote unquote watch industry, is not to go, let's open offices in Geneva and start calling ourselves a Maison. And no, fuck that. We want to be the guys that go out for beers on Tuesday.
Right.
that's who we were before Archanaut, and that's who most of our clients are. I mean, we have people that, say, oh, I had to save up for 6 months to buy one of these watches. Don't tell my wife what I paid for it. And it was one of their first big, expensive watches. One of my friends from high school, Adam Stokes, bought one of our Dark Matter watches. And he's like, this is the first watch I've ever bought.
Wow.
He's a lifelong construction worker, making pretty good money, but he's not the guy who's going to go out and buy a new Rolex every week like some of these people we know.
Right.
So that I like. That really gets me going. Even though we love and appreciate, say somebody in like Dubai or Singapore, that has a $200,000 Louis Monet on, buying an Archanaut, awesome.
Yeah.
But as far as what's really fulfilling, it's the person that had to kind of sweat about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot more intention. I think there was a lot more sort of like, I really had to dig my nails in and maybe sell off a couple other smaller pieces to get it and stuff.
Sure.
And those are the people that I think in the long run are going to benefit the brand. I mean, if you want to be a little sort of business cynical about it, flippers are just going to be excited about it until they sell it. Right. But somebody that really had to sell a couple things to get it will keep it and will maybe give it to their kid one day. And that's just awesome.
That's the best.
I love that kind of way of thinking.
Yeah. Well, wrapping up here a little bit, I never asked you, what did your parents do for a living growing up?
Contract killers.
Sharpshooter, huh?
That's right. Paid assassin. Let's see. My mom raised two idiotic children. My dad, it was one of these things where I couldn't have even really have told you what his job was until I was about 30. He was a business dad.
Hey, he was in business.
No, he came up. He came up through construction management and stuff. And before he retired for a bunch of years, he had a project consultancy where they would set up the deal for major sort of urban construction projects like shopping malls and stadiums and that kind of stuff.
Is he still in Vancouver?
Yeah. Okay. And my brother kind of went into the same line of work as well, actually, for one of the same companies. So whenever my brother would be over for dinner, he and my dad would be talking about business stuff and all these multi, $25, $30 million developments they're doing in Vancouver.
Right.
And I would turn to my mom and be like, I drew a duck at school today.
Yes.
At the age of 25, look, Mom, right. I drew a duck.
No, but it's blue. The duck is blue, Mom.
It glows in the dark.
Yeah. What does your dad think of your operation now?
It was difficult in the beginning because there was nobody artistic in my family. And I did have to kind of crash and burn a couple times to get there. And that was facilitated by parents that took way better care of me than they probably needed to. So that I'm unbelievably grateful for. Parents giving you the space to cock it up a few times is pretty swank. And actually, one of the proudest moments of my life was the whole reason that we have this Archanaut 4-Dite series was I gave my dad my Arc 2. And then I actually got it back from him, and we modified it to become the very first 4-Dite prototype. So for about a year, he had the only 4-Dite Archanaut in existence. Cool. And we didn't show any pictures of it, didn't show it to anybody because we knew people would start saying, oh, can you make us one?
Yeah.
And, at that point, it was only been about a year since we did the Bamford 4-Dites. And I really didn't want to be stepping on toes with that, so to speak. So I actually spoke to George about all this before we started doing it. And he just gave a huge enthusiastic thumbs up, which was pretty awesome of him.
Sure.
So giving my dad the very first Archanaut 4-Dite was really cool because now he wears it all the time.
Oh, that's great.
I just saw my cousin in Copenhagen last week. So at my cousin Kyle's wedding in San Francisco a couple weeks before, he and my dad were both wearing Archanaut watches because Kyle bought one of the Dark Matter. So my dad grabs the wedding photographer and pulls him away from the bride and gets him to start taking pictures of he and my cousin wearing their fucking. So I'm probably gonna get a bill for like $10,000 from the wedding photographer for that. But that was pretty cool.
James, thanks, man.
Absolute pleasure. I hope you can use some of this.
100%.
And yeah, maybe we'll see you in San Francisco.
Yeah, for sure. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much.
Speak soon.
Okay, bud.
Thanks, pal. Cheers.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard Age podcast. If you liked what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track, as well as Clear Audio for the noise canceling headphones. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.